Oh, yeah, let's go to work. Welcome to First Take. Shea Cornette probably still out celebrating her beloved Indiana Hoosiers winning the national championship. So to the bullpen we go. I'm Joe Fortenbaugh, joined by Stephen A., Chris Canty, Desmond Howard, Jeff Saturday, EJ Manuel will be stopping by a little bit later in the show, but we begin with one of the most improbable national championships of all time. Indiana held the line against Miami last night, 27-21, to cap a perfect 16-0 season and take home the first national title in program history. Heisman winner Fernando Mendoza was tough as a $6 steak, which includes an incredible touchdown run in the fourth quarter on 4th and 5 before the defense picked off Carson Beck in the closing minute to seal the championship for the Hoosiers. Here's head coach Curt Cignetti and Mendoza after their win.
We won the national championship at Indiana University. It can be done, and I'm so happy for our fans. Words can't describe it.
Finally, how are you going to celebrate, Coach?
I'm going to have beer. There's no better group of guys I want to deal with. It's the most special moment of my life. There's such a great group of guys. I love you guys. Great job. Let's go!
Indiana finished the season a perfect 16-0, joining 1894 Yale as the only two teams in major college football history to finish 16-0. I remember that one. Yale was huge in the portal that year. Stephen A., the biggest reason Indiana got to lift that trophy last night is what?
Well, listen, I mean, obviously Mendoza, that was a phenomenal play, a phenomenal run, no doubt about it, going forward on fourth down, the way that they did, showing their courage, their bravery, being exceptionally well coached by Cignetti, all of those things come into play. But when you also take into account the fact that they trounced Alabama, they trounced Oregon, and then obviously, they did what they did against Miami last night. They didn't turn over the ball one time. And when you look at it from that standpoint, outscoring your opponents like 59-7 in the first half, if I remember something along those lines, having dominant first halves, having the momentum, playing ahead, not playing catch up, all of those things contributed to it. But in the end, it comes down to their leadership, I believe. And when you've got a quarterback, Mendoza didn't look great throughout the game. We understand that. But when it really, really counted, he made a play for the ages. And that kind of stuff really, really sticks out in your mind. That's what stands out in my mind. There were things that Miami did do that we could get into it. Desmond and CC are far more qualified than me to get into it specifically at this moment in time. But the bottom line is that, you know what, Mendoza and Cignetti, that's what it comes down to. That play by Mendoza is going to stand out for the ages, no doubt about it, and that's what propelled them to victory.
Des, jump in here. Your thoughts on what the biggest reason was Indiana was able to pull this off?
Well, to expound on what Stephen A. said, which he spoke about very eloquently, those are the things that really jump out at you initially. But for me, also, it's a game of moments. I put it to you like this. When you're playing championship games, either in the playoffs or the championship game, it's a game of moments. And that blocked punt for a touchdown was a moment. And that was the moment to me when Indiana really stole the game. Now, I told my sons who I was watching it with, I said, that's a colossal error right there for Miami, and it's going to come back to haunt them. I said, I do think that Miami will get the ball and they will score. But don't forget, this happened in the second half. Miami was already down 2 scores going into halftime. So it was an uphill battle for them the whole second half. So as you're climbing that hill and something as colossal as that happens, then that's something that is really, really hard to recover from. It's a game of moments at the championship level. And to me, that really turned things around. But to expound on one other thing that Stephen A. said, I had tremendous amount of respect for Mendoza coming out of that game and for Cignetti, because another big moment was when it was 4th down and they ran the offense off the field and brought on the special teams. And then they called a timeout and they ran the special teams off the field and brought back on the offense. And he called that quarterback draw from Mendoza. That was a hell of a call. But the moment was the effort that young man did to get that ball into the end zone. I mean, he must have taken 4 or 5 big shots, and then he stretched his 6'4", 6'5" frame across the goal line, showing, listen, I'm putting it all out there on the line tonight for my guys, for my team, for my program, for my school. I will not be denied. That was the second moment.
Yeah, Des, the block kick at the end of the third quarter was absolutely huge. When you have that sound in football, when your team has the ball, it's the worst sound you ever want to hear. So that was a huge momentum shift for the Indiana Hoosiers. But to me, the reason why Indiana won this game was execution, physicality, and grit. And we know that because we realized that talent wasn't the reason that they won. Indiana last night just completed its fourth straight win against teams that have 40 or more 4- or 5-star prospects. Ohio State had 57 4- or 5-star recruits. Alabama, 57 4- or 5-star recruits. Oregon, 55 4- or 5-star recruits. And then, of course, Miami, 45 4- or 5-star recruits. Indiana has 0 5-star recruits and 8 4-star recruits. So you know they're not overwhelming people with talent, but what they are doing is overwhelming you with their execution. And that, to me, is the most impressive part. The fourth quarter drives, you're talking about 2 drives where they held the ball for 5 minutes or more. To me, that's impressive. And it would have been longer had you not had the false start on 2nd and 1 that made it 2nd and 6 and ends up putting Curt Cignetti in a situation where he's got to make a difficult call on what he's going to do on 3rd down. Now, ultimately, it didn't come back to bite him because they were able to get that takeaway on the final drive, and you can set your watch to it when it comes to Carson Beck, the old Carson Beck from Georgia that we know and love, turning the ball over at the most inopportune times. Indiana held the ball for over 36 minutes. They had over 40 rush attempts, and they had 19 completions. When you add up the completions plus the rush attempts, they were north of 60. Anytime you have that, you're going to put yourself in a good spot to win a football game. That's exactly what happened last night.
I can't remember the last time, pro or college, I watched a team play so many clean football games. Just consistently clean, consistently avoiding big mistakes, like the block punt last night that ate up Miami, like the mistakes Ole Miss made against Miami, like Buffalo this weekend turning the ball over 5 times. Indiana just plays a smart, clean brand of football, and they allow the opponent to lose the game, kind of like what we saw from the New England Patriots. Stephen A., back over to you. Now that we're living in this world where the Indiana Hoosiers are our national champions, what does that mean for the state of college football?
Well, I think it's great from the standpoint that you've got a guy like what CC just highlighted. When you look at Ohio State, when you look at Alabama, when you look at all of these 5-star recruits that they've accumulated, and yet Cignetti is sitting up there with not even 10% of what they have, and he wins a national championship. And by the way, goes undefeated in doing so and romps teams along the way in capturing the national championship. If I'm a coach at one of these blue blood programs, let me tell you what Cignetti has just done. And I dare CC and Des to disagree with this. What he's done is he's put all of those dudes are on notice, not because he'll want their job, but every program is going to be measuring their head coaches based off of this. Wait a minute, this guy shows up and wins a national championship without having to accumulate all of these 5-star athletes, without having to spend but so much of an abundance of money on NIL and stuff like that. What the hell is going on here? If he was able to do that, why the hell can't you? Why do you need all of this money? Think about it. James Franklin departed from Penn State. They booted him out of there. We're happy he's got a job at Virginia Tech. But the bottom line is this. They booted him out of there, but it was after giving him a boatload of money and resources coming into the season. And then very, very early on, Penn State was a huge disappointment. When you see stuff like that transpiring, and we've seen other coaches, remember how we made so much of the buyouts, how these guys was getting paid not to coach? Well, guess what? You're going to see a lot of programs right now looking at it. So we don't need to do all of that to win. You actually can do it another way without bleeding our coffers. You actually can do it. So I think that that's definitely a profound impact that it's going to have on college football. But again, it's still, as things change, they remain the same, because years ago we were talking about the SEC. Now we're talking about the Big Ten, because the last 3 national champions were Michigan, Ohio State, and now Indiana. Clearly the Big Ten is the creme de la creme. The SEC has fallen off dramatically. And when we take into account the group of five with Tulane and James Madison and what they equated to and how Notre Dame didn't make, the college football playoffs and all of that other stuff, as things change, they remain the same. You still got big-time conferences that everybody's looking at, in this case, the Big Ten. Some of the lesser conferences you're not paying attention to, but so much. And then you're going to see people talking about how do we gain more parity in college football. Cignetti has proven there's one way to do it. Another way to do it is by making sure that, you don't put the Tulanes and the James Madisons in the mix, and you make sure somebody else, the top 12 teams in the nation, or in the future, the top 16 or the top 20, are actually the ones that are in the playoffs.
Des, Indiana's title means what for college football?
Well, I tell you what, I agree wholeheartedly with what Stephen A. just said, because I'm old school, guys, right? Like, I love coaches who are able to do more with less. Like, those are the guys to me who can really coach, who can really develop talent. And because now of the NIL and the portal, guys are trying to buy championships. They're going to buy players who are already developed. So I really agree with what Stephen A. is saying. Guys like, I don't want to put this team on blast, but let's just say Texas Tech. Coming to the 2025 season, there was a lot of noise about all the millions that Texas Tech spent on getting these players, especially defensive players. And what happened to Texas Tech? They were knocked out of the playoff in their first game in the Orange Bowl against Oregon. So you have all these guys where it's like a spending spree, where it seems like a lot of universities the year before that, Ohio State went on record saying how much they spent, upwards of $20 million, putting their roster together, and then they happened to win a national championship. But it seems like now everyone's part of this spending spree to buy a championship, as opposed to now letting your coaches develop the talent they have and out-coach somebody. So it's refreshing to me to see a guy like Cignetti, who has a staff and who has a roster that's not littered with top-name coaches and top-name players or 4- or 5-star players, but they go out there and execute at such a high level against the Blue Bloods. Now, it's good to see a program that's not, Georgia or whoever, that wins a national championship. It's better for the sport in general. I love that, and I'm excited. But now the hard work starts for Cignetti, because he was the hunter. Now they're about to be hunted. And not only that, coaches are going to start to want to poach some of his coaches. And today is the day that you pick up your phone and you start seeing messages from Indiana players saying, well, first of all, I love to thank everybody at Indiana University for their love and support, because, this is that day for Indiana. So, you know what I mean? So now, because of last night's game and because of their run, their draft stock has gone up for some players, and they're going to make a decision to leave the program. So they're going to celebrate, and they're to be celebrated. But now the hard work is really going to start for Coach Cignetti, his coaches, and that staff and that program, because people are going to try to poach players and coaches, and some players just going to leave for the draft.
He says the hard work is going to start for Curt Cignetti. I'm going to call him Curt Cignetti because he's a national championship champion today. But we've got proof of concept that you can win a title at Indiana. He's got proof of concept that he can turn a transfer quarterback in Fernando Mendoza into the presumptive first overall pick. Why do you think Josh Hoover left TCU to come to Indiana in the transfer portal? Because he wants Curt Cignetti to do for him what he did for Fernando Mendoza. And so when we look at this win over the U, this is the culmination of one of the most unlikely seasons, one of the most unlikely championships that we've seen in all of sports. To me, this is right up there with Miracle on Ice, Buster Douglas, 28-3 in Super Bowl 51, the 2007 New York Giants beating the undefeated Patriots, and maybe most aptly, the 2001 New England Patriots, the beginning of the dynasty with Bill Belichick in Foxborough. That's what it feels like with this win, this game. This is like real life Shark Tank for Indiana University, right? Curt Cignetti comes in from JMU. Year one, they get to the college football playoff. They're one and done. but then more resources get poured into the program. Mark Cuban commits even more money to the program, and then all of a sudden, we're talking about Indiana being the team to beat. This is Curt Cignetti's college football world, and the rest of those coaches are just living in it. I think this is the beginning of a dynastic run for Indiana University.
There's also
Well, you know what?
Go ahead, Stephen A.
CC may have a point from this standpoint. When you look at Cignetti, I like that. I like that. He deserves that today, no doubt. But I'm looking at the coach, and I'm looking at Indiana University. Do y'all know that they had a combined 11 turnovers for 71 yards in the last 3 playoff games? 11 turnovers for 71 yards in 3 games. Think about that for a second. So I'm looking at it from that standpoint. I'm like, that's less than 25 yards in penalties over the last 3 games. And I'm looking at it and I'm saying, okay, discipline. Obviously, you went out there and you get some players that are a bit seasoned. I was on Sirius XM with Michael Irvin yesterday. It was hilarious last night, right before the game. He was doing an interview and we were asking him questions about, the development process at Indiana, because you got a lot of these players that are a bit older. And then obviously Malachi Tony in Miami is only 18 years of age or something like that. And you're looking at Indiana, he's a bad brother, no question about it. He's special. He's special. Had about 203 yards over the last 2 games. He's a brother special, but he's still young. And you look at Indiana, that wasn't the case. Michael Irvin said, yeah, they got a few players on their squad about as old as me. And everybody started cracking up laughing because that's how he's thinking about it. You looking at these guys and they're seasoned. Once again, Cignetti is showing you, you identified a talent, but you also identified a level of experience and the fact that you want to bypass that developmental process because of the age that we're living in with NIL and the transfer portal, etc. You might not have the time, Des and CC, to really build a program and develop, etc., etc. We got to remember, he pulled this off in 2 years. He was a 52-9 at James Madison. He comes over to Indiana his first year. He only loses 2 games. In his second year, he goes undefeated. So not only was what I talking about earlier relevant in terms of putting pressure on other coaches because of how successful he was, but to really crystallize it even more, the waiting game doesn't favor them either, because you're going to have administrations going like this. We ain't got to wait 5 years. He did it in 2. How come you can't do it in 3? In year 1, he showed vast improvement. How long is it going to take for you? And then you got old school guys like Des. What about Dabo, who I love, at Clemson? Bit reticent, obviously, about the way the game has changed. The NIL, the transfer portal. You don't want to deal with all of that. Begrudgingly so, he's had to deal with it. But now something like this highlights his need to make that adaptation because Cignetti came in and did it. And so when you look at it from that standpoint, it's like, the excuses have just gone out the door. Nobody is trying to hear anything now. Cignetti has put the college football landscape on notice. And there's a whole bunch of coaches that's going to lose their job and lose their comfort zone. I tell you that much because of what this man just accomplished at Indiana.